This morning, we continue our series on the Strengths Finder. Gallup has identified 34 strengths. These strengths are identified through a 129 question online assessment my wife was talking about this morning. That assessment will give you your top 5. This morning, we want to talk about discipline. People who are especially talented in the discipline theme enjoy routine and structure. Their world is best described by the order they create. People who are especially talented in the discipline theme, their world needs to be predictable. Their world needs to be ordered. Their world needs to be carefully planned out. Because what they do is they set routines, they focus on timelines and deadlines, they plan in advance, and then they follow the plan. And they break long-term projects into specific short-term plans, and then they diligently work through those plans. Precision and detailed, that's what they are as an organizer. Now, in our lives, there's a lot of plans that we have control over. And as you know, there are a lot of plans that we have no control over. Let me give you an example. Were you able to plan where you were born? Anyone? Anyone? No. Were you able to plan when you were born? Nope. Were you able to plan who you were born to? No. We're not able to plan the color of our skin and who our parents are. None of that is planned. And it's no different in Daniel. Daniel was chosen as discipline. And Daniel was not able to choose the period of time he was born. And there are a lot of circumstances in his life that he had no say in. He was born to a noble family. And Daniel was in middle school when King Nebuchadnezzar came from Babylon and besieged Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar conquers Jerusalem in about 606 BC. And we'll jump into the story a little further. King Nebuchadnezzar instructed the master of his eunuchs to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles back to Babylon. The king is looking for a few good men. And the qualifications that he's looking for are young men who there was no blemish, but good looking. Disqualified here. Anyway, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, and the ability to serve in the king's palace. Notice that these young men, they were supposed to be without defect. As I said, good looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, because they needed to be able to serve in the king's court. Let's face it, the guys that Nebuchadnezzar put in charge of this, they were wise men, able to assess the qualities of these young men, and they took the best. They took all the best, because that's what you do when you conquer. You come in and you want it, you take it. So they take these young men back. They don't take their families, they take them. Here's Daniel, 12, 13, 14 years old, and he's stripped away from his family, and he's taken into captivity. Now, the good thing is that these young men are taken for a reason, and the reason is because they're going to receive privileged instruction for privileged positions. They're going to go into an indoctrination program. Some people call it orientation. Some people call it public schools. Some people call it indoctrination. You pick the word you want to use. But that's what Daniel's going into. He's going to undertake a drastic change. His world has just been turned upside down. Because in Babylon, they don't want him to be a Jew. They want him to be like them. And so everything's going to change. They're going to give him a new name. His old name is gone. They gave him a new name. And that new name and the new names of his friends reflected the idol worship that was going on in Babylon. So their names changed. I'm sure their wardrobes changed. And the education changed. They're not going to the synagogue. They're not going to learn about God anymore. They're taught a new language and literature. They're taught mathematics, astronomy, natural history, agriculture, and architecture. They're taught the ways of the Medes and the Persians. Now, the culture of the Medes and the Persians and the culture of the Jewish faith collide big time. As you know, in the Jewish culture, there's a God. One God. Not a bunch of gods. There's one God in the Jewish culture. The Medes and the Persians, they have many gods. And fortunately, Daniel paid attention as a youth growing up. All the teaching and training, he paid attention and he was disciplined. He had a routine in his life. He had a routine designed around his relationship with God. Daniel learned about God. It was his God. It wasn't, it wasn't somebody else's God. It's important when we teach our children that it's their God. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But his relationship with God, he took it to heart. He believed this was his God, and there was nobody that could take God away. Nobody. When our children are young and they're in our care, it's very important that we train them up in the ways of the Lord. It's very important and it's exciting when that becomes real in their life. When they have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that is a good thing. It's a healthy thing because they need that. They need that relationship if they're going to survive in this world. Because the culture that we live in, I don't know whether you've noticed, I'm sure that it's escaped most of you, and I'm probably the only one that's picked up on the signals, but Christianity's not as popular as it used to be. There are people actually getting in trouble for praying and reading their Bible. My goodness, what's the world coming to?
You can take God out of my school. You can make me listen to you. You can take God out of the pledge, but you can't take God out of my head. Listen to me closely, lend me your ear. The substance of my statement lets you know I'm sincere. Government officials, shapers of the land.
It's important that they know who they are and whose they are. And it's important that they understand that, because when they step out into the world, that message isn't necessarily going to be the same. This is what they need to know.
You can't take God away from me. You can take my life, my land, my liberty. Lock me up, I'll still be free. 'Cause you can't take God from me.
Daniel got it in spades. There was no compromise in Daniel. Nobody could take God away from him. He got it. And he got it so much that he had disciplined his life to pray 3 times a day. His family had been stripped away from him. He had been hauled off and taken to a foreign land and exposed to a totally different culture, but it didn't change who he was on the inside. You can't take God away because he's in here. And I don't know how you're going to get in and take him. I mean, like the song says, you can take my life and you can take my liberty, but you can't take God. Doesn't happen. Oh, how powerful that is. Because living in the land that Daniel lived in, and with all the stuff that was going on around him, it didn't change who he was. He didn't blame God. He didn't say, oh, God, why did you take me away from my family and poor me, and there must not be a God. I mean, no. Back into the story. So the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank. And there was this 3-year training program that Daniel was a part of. And Daniel and his friends calmly objected to the king's table. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. He requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Why? Let's back up a minute. Daniel's taken off into captivity, and he's learning things he's never learned before. He's learning about all of these things, and the thing that he objects to is the food. Why would he do that? Well, for one, it probably wasn't kosher. I'm serious. If you want some light reading when you get home, read Leviticus, specifically the 11th chapter, and you'll see that there's a whole list of foods that needed to be prepared or not eaten, and I'm sure that the king's table had a lot of that. Plus, you say, well, why would the wine be bad? Well, all of the food and wine that was on the king's table had been dedicated to their God and blessed for their idol. And that would go against Daniel's upbringing also. So Daniel didn't want to sin in this way. And so he objected. He said, no, I don't want to partake of the king's table. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar dies, and eventually King Darius takes over the throne. By this time, we fast forward, and Daniel is established. His ability to organize as well as bring order and integrity to the king's court, it's well established. And we pick up chapter 6. Darius is to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom. And over these 3 governors, over these 120 satraps, there are 3 governors. And notice, one of them is going to be Daniel. And the job of these satraps is to give an account so that the king would suffer no loss. You think this might have to do with finances? Maybe government waste? Maybe kickbacks? Maybe some lobbying going on behind the scenes? We go on and see that Daniel distinguished himself above all the other governors and satraps because of his excellent spirit. And the king gave thought to setting him over the entire realm. Wow. Little Daniel, hauled off into captivity, is now fixing to be over the entire realm. Darius is going to promote Daniel. And it had to be. It just had to be public knowledge. It couldn't have happened behind the scenes in closed quarters because no one in that administration would have ever leaked that information. There's no way that would have got out as a leak. And so we go on, and the governors and satraps, they heard about this, obviously not through leaks, and they sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. These politicians, that were so skilled in corruption, they had to end Daniel, because if they didn't end Daniel, he was going to end them. They weren't going to be able to operate anymore. Daniel was going to expose all the schemes, and we'll see that, because Daniel had no fault. They tried to find fault in Daniel, and there's nothing. He's clean as can be. He's not on the dole. He doesn't owe anybody anything. Daniel's got to go. There's no way that we're going to make it if Daniel stays. And so what do? They've got to find a charge against Daniel. And the only charge they can find is going to have to be about his God. Because the only fault that Daniel had was he was too godly. That was the problem. So these guys get together and form a conspiracy to keep Daniel from being promoted. And they urge the king to pass this law. It says, whoever prays to or worships any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. What king is going to say no to that? I don't know whether you know this, but usually people of power they like compliments. I'm just saying. And so the king agrees. But see, this plan is on purpose, because they know about Daniel. And they know what Daniel does, his routine. He's organized. He's every day like clockwork. They know who he is. And so by passing this law, they're going to set a precedent that's going to prevent the king from reversing the law. Once the king finds out that the real victim of the law is Daniel, who, by the way, the king is getting ready to promote to be over the entire realm. Daniel's testimony and Daniel's character is impeccable here. Daniel, when he knew that the law was signed, he went home, and look what he does. He hides in the closet, right? No. He goes to his upper room with the windows open towards Jerusalem, and he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God, as was his custom since early days. He didn't hide in the closet. He didn't change his pattern or his routine. He prayed on his knees like he always did, with the windows open towards Jerusalem. Needless to say, the plot to arrest Daniel now was solid. And Daniel is arrested. And the punishment for this is going to be death by lions. Now, the king knew Daniel was a strong, organized, disciplined man, knew Daniel's faith. And when Daniel was brought before the king and the king realized that he had been tricked and there was nothing he could do to change the law, he decided to give Daniel some last words. As Daniel went to the lion's den, he said, Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. And this pagan king stayed up all night praying and fasting. And the next morning, the king came to the den and he cried out with a lamenting voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? And the voice came back, King, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Daniel was disciplined in his relationship with God. It was unchanging. He was secure. And as we think about what could possibly have been going on in Daniel's mind in the lion's den,
Days from first to last, before a single word had passed, and as the world was brought to be, you lovingly designed and crafted me. I walk along the path you trace, I feel your presence in each place, and if the darkness hides the day,
what could he have been feeling? What could he have been saying? Maybe this.
deepest hopes and fears are known, no private thought that can be shown. In every wounded place I see is drawing me to you and you to me. So as each moment passes by, I look to you to guide my life, for I have come to understand that
Your silent love comes over me. In the stillness of my memory, I feel your touch. I've heard your call.
love comes over me. In the stillness of my memory, I feel your touch.
Your silent love remains unchanged and strong. God's presence in the lion's den. We forget that Daniel's disciplined relationship had a benefit program. Daniel could have been ripped apart in the lion's den. Daniel was spared. God's silent love over us remains unchanged and strong. Jesus is the ultimate discipline. Jesus had a plan, and he followed that plan. He created structures, especially in his prayer life. Jesus always knew his purpose on earth, and he didn't let anything distract him from that purpose. His purpose was to do the will of the Father. And the way that he knew to do the will of the Father was by spending time alone. Jesus' prayer life was disciplined. In Luke the 6th chapter, Jesus went to the mountain to pray, and he continued all night in prayer. In the 9th chapter, Jesus took Peter and John and James and went up to the mountain to pray. He didn't pray only to set an example for us. He prayed to show that even the Son of God needed to be connected to God through prayer. It's obvious that Jesus spent time alone with the Father. His disciples knew it. They saw the correlation. They saw his discipline, his routine, and so they asked, Lord, teach us to pray. To develop a relationship with somebody, you have to spend time with them. And I have a rhetorical question for you this morning. Did you eat breakfast this morning? Are you planning to eat again today? Are you going to eat tonight? and tomorrow. Typically, we eat at least 3 meals a day. Some people more, some people less. But we eat every day. We schedule it. We work our schedule around it to make sure that we get to eat because it's important to us. And so my question is, how much time a day do you spend alone with God? Because if you're going to develop a relationship with him, it can't be a once-a-week thing. I mean, it can, but how well would you be doing physically if you ate once a week? I just saying. Daniel prayed 3 times a day. We eat 3 times a day. Do you think that maybe our time alone with God could rival or exceed the time we spend at the table? Do you think that might be an important part of our lives, an important discipline for us? Spending time alone with God, there's not a downside, folks. I was in youth ministry since 1983. I'm not going to do the math. It's still kind of early in the morning. But one of the most important things over the years to me was teaching young people, not only that young people accept Jesus, but then they have the opportunity to be discipled. The staff that I had under me in the Life program, we spent time every week training and teaching them so that they could feed themselves. We have to eat, folks. We don't eat folks. We eat the Word. God speaks to us through His Word. We speak to God through prayer. We have everything we need to make it. So my question is, how important is it daily to hear from God? How important do you think it might be to get guidance and direction for today? God's plan for your life. We hear a lot about that. God has a plan for your life. But God's plan, God's purpose, God's direction, listen, it might surprise you, but it's detailed and specific. He's got it all mapped out. Sometimes it's turn-by-turn directions. Other times, it's a holding pattern, and we wait. But God has created you unique and special. There's only one you. There's only been one you. There's only going to be one you. You're one of a kind. We've learned a lot over the last few years about not only fingerprint technology, but DNA and how unique it is. And the strengths test is just as unique. It only emphasizes how unique you are. Do you realize that that the chances of somebody having your top 5 in the same order are 1 in 33 million? How crazy is that? You are so unique. Psalmist said in Psalm 139, "For you formed my inward parts." God made me like I am. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't make something that needed to be changed. He made me just like I am. And He covered me in my mother's womb. God knows everything about you. He knows your past. You say, "Well, yeah, I know my past too." And He knows your present. "Yeah, I know that too." But He also knows the future. And that blows your mind. Because God's got it all mapped out. He has His plan. And then there's my plan. There's His plan. And there's my plan. And He knows which one I'm going to choose and when I'm going to choose it. God knows the day I'm born, and He knows the day I'm going to die. Every choice, every decision is mapped out. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah. How can God know everything? Well, His ways are not my ways, and His thoughts are not my thought. Because time, like we know it, doesn't exist to Him. He doesn't have the same boundaries we have. What's cool about it is He knows the decisions I'm going to make, and He still loves me. He knows the mistakes that I've made, and he still wants me. That blows your mind. Because that's not the way that we operate. We have trouble wrapping our mind around the way God thinks because God is so different from us. We get stuck. Stuff happens. We get stuck right there. We can't move. We get distracted by other things that other people are doing and saying, and we lose our discipline. Our routine needs to be consistent. It needs to be the same. It needs to be planned. It needs to be precise. Why? Because God doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it's important that I don't get detoured off of what it is I need to do. He goes on to say, the psalmist goes on to say, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God knows everything about me. There are no secrets. He knows. He knows every hurt, every pain, every heartache. He cares. He wants me. He wants a relationship with me. He wants me to spend time with him every day. He doesn't want me just to come once a week. Now, we get a good meal when we come to church on Sunday, and that's good. We need that, but we need a meal every day. I'm sorry, I can't just eat once a week. I got to eat every day. I got to have that on the inside. I got to hear from you, Lord, today. I got to hear from you tomorrow. I need to know where you want me to go and what you want me to do, and he has a plan. Just know that that plan is not free of difficulty. He didn't say it was always going to be smooth. He didn't say that there weren't going to be obstacles and things that are going to happen. He doesn't promise that. But just like Daniel, he promises to be with me. I can't ask for anything more. My question to you this morning is, can you trust the plan? Can you trust his plan for you? Is it enough to trust him? Daniel, his whole world came crashing down as a young teenager, and he didn't quit. He didn't say, oh no, God, that's enough. I'm done. Oh no. He kept praying 3 times a day. He didn't stop. The love that the Father has for you and for me is nothing can compare. So special, so personal, so fresh. His silent love, it covers me. It holds me. It's there with me. I want to be where he wants me to be. I want to be doing what he wants me to do with who he wants me to do it with. That is my desire. What about you? Does Jesus live in your heart? Do you have a personal relationship with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? He loves you. He wants you desperately. He has a plan. It's all planned out. All I have to do is surrender. Say, Lord, I'm yours. And it's helpful if every day I go spend time with him and I let him change me and I let him do what he needs to do. How great your love is.